Hi guys, welcome to the Niels van Roij Design channel and welcome to a review on the new electric Porsche, the Taycan. Yes, we have a new iteration of the Taycan already, the shooting brake-esque four-wheel drive, slightly rugged version, but we're going to have a look at, let's say, the base car, the original car, because it's a very, very important car for Porsche, the first, like I said, fully electric Porsche. So without any further ado, let's have a look at this video that Porsche has put out on the Taycan, and in this case the Turbo S, the top-end Taycan model.
Welcome to a new episode of Porsche Top 5. We are very excited to have one of Germany's biggest electric heads here in Weissach today. Say hello to Alex.
Hallo zusammen, ich bin Alex und ein großer Fan von Elektromobilität. Dementsprechend ist es heute ein ganz besonderer Tag für mich. Ich bin nämlich in Weissach beim Porsche Entwicklungszentrum. Wir dürfen uns den voll elektrischen Porsche Taycan anschauen und mit dem Porsche-Experten darüber reden. Kommt mit, auf geht's. Servus, Robert.
Alex.
Hey.
Hi.
Danke, dass ihr mich reingeschmuggelt habt in euren Hochsicherheitstrakt.
Ja, schön, dass du da bist.
Der Porsche Taycan ist ein ganz besonderer Porsche. Euer erster rein elektrischer Porsche.
Ja.
Der Wagen ist ja aus der Konzeptstudie Mission E entstanden. Gibt es vielleicht irgendwie eine Anekdote, ein Funfact, irgendwas, das man als Außenstehender nicht wissen kann, was aber eigentlich ganz interessant zu wissen wäre?
Ein ganz spannender Punkt, kann man auch gut an dem Modell hier sehen, ist im Endeffekt dieser Punkt hier. Also wie kann ich die Flyline des Fahrzeugs hier schön weit runterziehen? Also wie kann ich diesen Punkt schön weit runterdrücken?
Ja, das Modell ist auch schon super schön, aber Robert, habt ihr nicht vielleicht sogar ein Original hier stehen?
Alles klar, dann schauen wir uns das an.
Gut.
Hier kommt der Michael, er hat die Aerodynamik gemacht.
Was für ein schönes Auto. Und es kommt da schön rausgerollt und man sieht sofort, was für ein schöner Porsche, auch wenn man nicht einen lauten Motor aufheulen hört.
Stimmt.
Ja, das ist unsere aerodynamische Speerspitze, was in
Let's have a quick stop here because what he's saying is obviously correct. At first glance, it has to be clear that despite the fact this is a brand new powertrain, it's not a flat six in the back or a V8 in front. It has to be very clear that this is a Porsche, but also that this is not an electric 911 or an electric Panamera. Or a Cayenne for that matter. This is a new Porsche typology, if you like, a new addition to the model range, and that's difficult because Porsche has this very clear lineup. The 911 being obviously at the core. Now the lineup has obviously grown since the Cayenne came already. I think 20 years ago, something like that. The first Cayenne. But that was a revolution, totally something different, a car that received quite a bit of criticism, but a very important car because that's why they still exist. It's because of the fact they make SUVs that Porsche is still out there. So everybody knows that, but let's get back to this car, the Taycan. This side view shows you very clearly that this is a Porsche, despite the fact that you can't really see the details yet. It's a great way actually of focusing on the proportions. It's this outline that is emphasized, if you like, by the wind flowing over it. Looking through your eyelashes, it's clear that this is some sort of a Porsche, but it's definitely also not a 911, despite the fact that it has a sloping roofline, despite the fact that it has this straight up windscreen, very typical of Porsches. So they really captured the essence of what a Porsche should be, and also pushed it into a new direction. It sits a lot lower in its wheels than, let's say, comparable Panamera does. So it has very different proportions, and of course they can do this because there's not this massive block, this massive engine in front that obviously the Panamera does have. So the fenders can be nice and low, which then means that basically the entire architecture of the car can be low. You can sit lower in the car because the engine is not there. There is not an engine that needs a lot of air coming in. So all these points of the package of the engine in front needing the air means that and then pedestrian safety on top of that engine. So cars are getting higher and higher because of that. And then obviously the driver has to sit high enough to look over that high engine. and that high bonnet. So if you don't have all that, you can lower a car again. You know, after all these years of making cars higher and higher, we can lower them again and make something truly unique out of the proportions. So you can see that Porsche definitely did that.
Widerstand anbelangt.
Und da bist eben du auch mitverantwortlich. Du bist der Ingenieur für Aerodynamik. Und beim Elektroauto ist natürlich die Reichweite ganz wichtig. Und da denkt man vielleicht erst an den Akku, aber eben auch super wichtig ist die Aerodynamik. Von daher vielleicht die Frage, was war da die Herangehensweise?
Ja, also um die Reichweite zu maximieren bei dem Fahrzeug, haben wir uns einen sehr, sehr ambitionierten Zielwert bezüglich Luftwiderstand gesetzt. Und so hat der Taycan Turbo den geringsten Luftwiderstand all unserer Porsche-Fahrzeuge aktuell mit einem CW-Wert von 0,22.
Wenn ich von vorne aufs Auto raufschaue, ist ein Element, was mir so ein bisschen ins Auge sticht, immer der Lufteinlass. Wie viel Prozent macht es aus, so ein kleines Detail am Ende?
Das sind fast 20%. Die Kollegen, die in der Verbrennerwelt arbeiten, haben immer so ein bisschen die Probleme mit der Abgasanlage. Und hier konnte man sich wirklich aerodynamisch komplett austoben.
Ja, die muss irgendwo hin, ne?
Das heißt, du kannst zum einen den Unterboden perfekt glatt gestalten und dann hier hinten dieses Bauteil hier, wir nennen es Diffusor, halt perfekt ausgestalten über die gesamte Breite, wird hier die Luft sauber nach oben geleitet, um wirklich hier perfekt nach hinten abzuströmen, den Luftwiderstand komplett zu reduzieren.
Okay, ich habe viel über die Aerodynamik gelernt. Michael, besten Dank.
Ja, freut mich, dass du hier warst.
Und Robert, dich
sehen uns
sehe
gleich
ich später
noch.
auch noch.
Genau.
Super, danke euch.
Okay.
Und jetzt als nächstes kommt der Peter und wir reden über das Design. Hi, servus Peter, ich bin Alex.
Grüß dich, hi,
Hallo.
herzlich willkommen hier im Weissach.
Danke, danke. Und du bist der Mann verantwortlich für das Außendesign hier.
Ist richtig, ja.
Worauf bist du denn vielleicht besonders stolz, was das Design angeht?
Hauptsächlich, dass wir die Proportionen so hinbekommen haben, wie wir das haben wollten. Das Auto ist eigentlich ein Sportwagen geworden und damit ein echter Porsche.
Again, these proportions are absolutely key. Key for getting a real Porsche out there, but as he says rightly so, a real sports car. Porsche is a sports car, and maybe sounds all very obvious, but this is not an easy thing to achieve, even not with an electric car, because I'm sure, as you know, they share the floor plans in any big car manufacturer. They're all linked, so there will be carryover components. I'm not sure if they will talk about this, likely not, because this is a Porsche video, but there are so many elements tying designers down, making sure in a way that they cannot do what they should do, what they know they should do to make a car look good. But it's because of the bean counters, so the people that make sure a car is easy to produce, is not too costly to produce. It's the engineers, it's marketing people perhaps that come along, it's CEOs or CFOs or anybody in the board that says, I think this or I think that. So on many different levels, car designers in any OEM, any car manufacturer are experiencing this. So it is always hard to design any car, whether that's a Porsche or a Dacia or anything in between. All car designers face these type of issues. So the fact that, obviously I don't know which struggles they faced, but the fact that the car looks the way it looks shows that they really have their stuff under control.
Gibt es vielleicht einen Designaspekt, der dir wichtig war, aber der schwer zum Umsetzen war?
Wir haben eine Bodenbatterie in dem Auto und das war eine große Herausforderung. Wie kriegen wir das Fahrzeug so flach wie möglich, damit es ein echter Porsche wird? Und deswegen, da haben wir eine coole Idee ausgetüftelt mit dieser Fußgarage. Wir haben einen extra Bereich, damit haben wir die hintere Passagiertiefe jetzt im Auto und damit haben wir eine perfekte Flyline in der Seitenansicht. Das heißt, es ist eigentlich eine echte Porsche mit einer richtig abfallenden Dachlinie. Und jetzt zeige ich dir das Lichtdesign. Und dazu machen wir das Licht aus. Die Gestaltung der Lichter ist bei dem Autodesign extrem wichtig geworden. Und der Taycan ist vorne komplett neu gestaltet.
Again, this is an important statement, highlighting what I just said. It's not just a matter of designing a new car, it's designing a new Porsche. And how to do that, right? So it's a matter of looking back into their heritage, their history, but also pushing that into the future. You know, it should be a relevant car for Porsche, a car that sits logically, aesthetically within their entire lineup, from Boxster to Cayenne and anything in between, but also a car that is very much itself. That is a Taycan, and unmistakably a Taycan. So the down the road graphic, the facial features of a car, the headlights, and then the air intakes in the front, they define this down the road graphic, and they define the way you see a car, and the way you are able to say, well, this is a Porsche, right? So it's extremely important and also very difficult, specifically being a Porsche, to get that right, because you don't have a whole lot of wiggle room. You can't do something absolutely crazy, which will make it obviously a Taycan, let's say, easy to identify, but then it's not a Porsche anymore, right? So we have in our collective memories sort of stored what a Porsche has to be, what it looked like, and they have to continuously develop that, but step by step. And they can't alienate their existing clients, but they can also not do something that people know already and say, well, why would I buy that? It's not new. It's a very difficult position to be in, and to innovate in. Porsche is not an easy brand to design for. And you know, I've heard on Top Gear, for instance, where I think Jeremy Clarkson said, Porsche designers are the laziest designers out there. Well, the opposite is true. You know, it's extremely difficult to do what these guys and girls are doing. It's not an easy brand to work for.
Natürlich ein neues Gesicht für Porsche, eine Integration, Scheinwerfer und Aircurtain vorne, was das Fahrzeug sehr stark prägt. Und das Lichtbild ist natürlich von einer Seite, zeigt Markenidentität. Porsche hat 4-Punkt-Tagfahrlicht vorne.
This is a nice image I just wanted to show you. The way the soft curves, which is typically Porsche DNA, flow over the headlight and then create, in a way, an eyebrow. You see the, if you like, the opposite side of the metal, and it creates this flowing eyebrow that then goes down and then creates the shut line for the front trunk. Something very flowy, very soft, very curvy, very Porsche, but also very unique. And going from the top of the headlight towards the right-hand side, in this case, flowing down, having that vertical intake that will direct air into the wheel well and out of the wheel well again, creating a strong, clean flow of air around the car. Practical, because Porsche is form follows function, but also aesthetically very pleasing, very three-dimensional, very sculptural. The 4 dots that link to their race cars, perhaps he will talk about that a bit later in the video, but a very typical Porsche element of DNA. So very interesting, well executed, new piece of design, unmistakably Porsche still.
Was bei dem Taycan auch perfekt umgesetzt ist und im Detail natürlich eine extrem Hightech-Optik auch noch zeigt, was uns sehr wichtig war.
Dann schauen wir mal, was wir hinten gemacht haben.
Ja, sehr gerne.
Da fängt schon an, ich sehe schon hinten am Heck super dominantes Lichtelement. Das Leuchtenwand von links nach rechts durchgehend.
Genau.
So this is an interesting one. Because sadly for Porsche, this is what a lot of car manufacturers are doing now. This is hot, to have an LED strip or something that looks like neon going from the left-hand side of the car all the way to the right-hand side of the car. It's a trend in car design. It makes a car look white, makes a car look technically high-end. It's something people love to see, and a lot of brands do this kind of light feature at the back now, but Porsche has the right to use it. So imagine, all your competition, even within the Volkswagen group, Audi does this as well, for instance. And I think they don't have any right to use this because it has never showed up in the Audi DNA. So it's sort of dragged in there just because it looks cool. And Porsche has obviously this, since the 60s, this graphic on the back, in the very first 911, having something like that. This graphic, not yet linked, but the graphic was there to link the left hand and the right hand tail light. So imagine the pressure on the shoulder of the designers, the light designers in this case, or just the car designer in general, having that graphic that makes a Porsche typically Porsche, but then knowing that a lot of your competition does this as well. So how to avoid this car looking like one of the cars from the competition, despite the fact you as Porsche basically own this element of DNA. So let's get back to the video.
Ganz wichtiges Thema. Das ist eigentlich eine Markenidentität geworden bei Porsche, auch bei dem Taycan. Und da der Taycan sehr cleanes Design hat, war uns sehr wichtig, dass wir dieses Element extrem präzise ausführen, sehr homogen, sauber, durchleuchtet, ohne Trennungen in dem mittleren Bereich. Das sind so die, sag mal, die Kleinigkeiten, die aber ein Fahrzeug so ein richtig modernes Look geben.
Hey Peter, vielen lieben Dank für deine Zeit und für die Ausführungen zum Außendesign. Ich habe die Leidenschaft in der Stimme definitiv gespürt.
Sehr gerne.
Und weißt du, wer der nächste Gast ist? Dein Counterpart, der Innendesigner, der Ivo.
Hey, hallo.
Das Außendesign, wunderbar, bombastisches Design. Und jetzt interessiert es mich natürlich auch von innen. Zeigst du es mir?
Gerne.
Well, Ivo is a nice guy. He's Dutch as well, so always good to see Dutch car designers. Yeah, again, I think the Porsche design team did a truly fantastic job on the interior, linking it with heritage, but again, pushing it into the future very well with beautiful forms, materials, surfaces. But I'm sure Ivo will tell you all about that.
Weißt du, wenn du in ein Auto einsteigst, dann entweder du hast diesen Wow-Effekt oder du hast ihn nicht. Was habt ihr gemacht, um diesen Effekt zu bekommen?
Also ich glaube, das Wichtigste ist, unsere Gene treu zu bleiben. Das heißt, es ist ein echter Sportwagen, aber alles andere ist eher integriert und clean und zurückgenommen.
Du hast hier sehr viele Displays, ganz wenig Knöpfe. Ich mag moderne Bedienkonzepte, also damit bin ich super glücklich.
Ja genau, in der digitalen Welt ist es natürlich auch wichtig.
Yeah, so I'm sure if you've seen some of my other videos, I'm not overly keen on touchscreen only. Which this car seems to be. You know, you see the basically from telephone to heated seats to temperature, anything and everything is in that touchscreen, which looks fantastic. You know, very well executed design-wise. It's gorgeous. It's lovely. It's integrated well. You know, very clean, very Germanic, very Porsche. But it's horrible when it comes to the human-machine interface. The only reason car manufacturers are doing this is because A, it saves a load of money, and B, it's a fantastic showroom gimmick, or let's say video gimmick. It looks lovely, but it's not, you know, in any way, shape, it's not good to drive a car, especially not a sports car in which you cannot feel the switchgear. So minus points there for Porsche. I'm very sorry, despite the fact that I love the design, but this is, you know, they know better. I'm sure they know better. But again, this is likely the cost cutters or the marketing team or anybody else pushing down on them. It's going to be this, you know. It's no choice for a car designer very often. It's going to be this. This is the briefing. It has to be full touchscreen with perhaps only one or two physical buttons. So, unfortunately, that's the way it is here.
Wir haben ja Sprachbedienung, du kannst es bedienen mit Hey Porsche, also multimodal, aber eben auch ein kleiner haptischer Feedback nach wie vor, wenn ich hier was bediene auf der Mittelkonsole, dass ich das spüre.
Das hast du spüren angesprochen. Ich habe vorhin, als ich eingestiegen bin, ganz intuitiv schon das Auto so ein bisschen abgetastet. Was für Materialien verwendet ihr denn?
Also das Interieur hier, wo wir jetzt drin sitzen, ist komplett lederfrei. Das ist auch das erste Mal, dass wir das als Angebot haben.
Ganz toll, dass man sich da entscheiden kann, was man will. Was ist denn vielleicht noch, ich stelle die Frage so gerne, vielleicht dein Lieblingsfeature, dein Lieblingsdetail?
Was ich echt am coolsten finde, ist für mich das Kombi-Instrument. Dass das uns gelungen ist, das hat auch noch keiner gemacht. Das ist Freestanding, also nicht vergraben, also Freestanding, gecurved.
Das ist ein Blickfang.
Und auch nochmal hier rund abgeschnitten, so wie in den alten Elva. Also das ganze User Experience, oder wir sagen bei Porsche sogar Driver Experience, dass alles irgendwie neu gestaltet worden ist in der digitalen Welt. Auch speziell für dieses Auto.
Well, you know, all the credits to the team there. Ivo is absolutely right. It looks fantastic. It's a relevant link to history, the soft curved instrument panel of the first 911s, the way the instruments are positioned, but also the fonts, you know, they link to heritage and to history, but they are modern, they're easy to read. It's just, bar the fact that it's all touchscreens, the interior is truly magnificently done. So very, very well done. Rather than looking at the rest of the video, which is on the technical specs of the car and charging and all that kind of stuff, we're a car design channel here, so I'll take you into Photoshop and we'll have a look at the car and its design a little bit more in depth. So here we are in Photoshop, And let's have a quick look at the details that we just discussed. So it's these typical 4 units in the headlights, very technical, and linking to their racing. Then there's this soft flow on top, and round about here it's getting 3-dimensional, so you can actually look inside of the panel if you like. It's a bit hard to see on this photo, but you can actually, if you remember the movie, you can see inside of here. Then there's this lovely piece of sculpture there, so the light falls on top of that. It's really like an eye, where there's a bit of light catching there, the socket is deep, and then there's the eyebrow on top. Then if we zoom out, well, what do we see proportionally? We see this cabin that is pushed inwards, especially around the rear, generating these super nice and wide hips, very soft and curvaceous, typically Porsche again. I mean, this couldn't be anything else than a Porsche. And the same here, if you look at the softness of the flow of lines here, emphasized by that shut line of the bonnet, and here again, softness, very, very Porsche. Very clean front end with the lower intake making the car visually even wider than it is. It flows around the corner a bit, but pushed down, so it's not that obvious because it's all black in here. The sort of the visual weight of the car is being reduced. You read basically from here up until there. Then there's this typical daylight opening, DLO, the window graphic here, very soft, very curvaceous, very Porsche again. These are, you know, not easy things to achieve again, because like I said earlier, it has to fit in that Porsche portfolio. It has to look like a Porsche, but it has to be a different character, a different, a new generation, quite literally and figuratively speaking, of the Porsche DNA. So, having seen the exterior, let's have a quick look at the interior, because that's also very interesting. So here we've got the interior, and like Ivo pointed out, this instrument panel here in front of the driver, very special, this lovely soft flow of lines. There is nothing on top. Often you have this unit casting some shadow. Then there's this typical layout of one in the middle that's biggest, and then 2 flanking it, and then there's one here and one there too, especially if we link it back to the classic setup here. So an early 60s 911, and what you see, it's not just that flow of lines that they took from this early 911, but it's also the way the dash has been layered. See, so we have basically this element here that links very nicely to this element here. This very horizontal setup of lines, very clean, very simple, and then that curvaceous element over there. Really, really nicely done. So thanks for tuning in to this video. Thank you for requesting a video on the Taycan. I think it's a magnificent car. I mean, I could talk about it for an hour. I think there's so much to talk about. It's such an interesting car. It's so well executed. It's a relevant take on the Porsche DNA. It's a relevant car, obviously, for current day and age, completely electric. You know, I would say 9.5 out of 10. The only issue being that interior without any physical switchgear, but I'm happy to forgive them for that because this is so well done. You know, it's hard to improve on this. It's color and materials are interesting. The wheel design, there's so much to talk about, but we'll leave it at this. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for requesting these videos. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the notification bells. Have a comment, you know, let us know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree on my viewpoints? And I'll see you for the next video next week. Cheers.